I grew up on a farm in Pitcherville that my great-grandfather purchased in 1894. My dad was born in 1907 in Maynard, Mass. He was old enough to be my grandfather. When he was 3 years old, his mother and sisters, they moved to the farm in Pitcherville to live with Grandpa when his father took off and disappeared.
No, your grandfather, he never lived here. He was a Navy man, and he was a baker. And he just got the grudge of going back into the Navy when we were living in Maynard. I was 3 years old, and my sister was 3 months old when he left for the Navy. And so my mother and we kids, we came here to live with Grandpa. And so my mother inquired about it to the government, and they didn't know where he was. He probably had a name changed. And so then we came here to live, and my mother was a nurse. She worked on the Baldwinville Hospital and brought us up here. And so it was 1923 when my mother died, and my father came from Pittsburgh to the funeral. And I never seen him before that I can remember. But we brought up with Grandpa, and Grandpa was more a father to me, and I was more of a son to him when he lost his son in France in the First World War. And so I've been more like a son to him instead of a grandson.
It's amazing that I remember all my childhood, from 6 months on, real good. And many stories I remember of when I wasn't even walking yet. And one time we all took a ride to the Reset Farm in Templeton, and there was this big peacock cage, and the peacock spread its feathers, and there was a feather like this laying on the ground, and my mother asked if she could have it. I remember I wasn't even walking yet. I was riding on my dad's shoulders and seeing this peacock, and they gave my mother the feather that was on the bottom of the cage. And I remember sitting on my dad's shoulders waving this feather as we're walking around this farm. And when my mother got home, she put the feather in a vase on the sideboard, and seeing it every day, it always reminded me of that day. Some of the work we had to do at the farm, haying time, we had to go with the wagon and pitch the hay up into the wagon. There'd be one of us picking the hay up, and we'd throw it up in the wagon, and we'd pull it up in the wagon. Somebody else would be up there and pack it down and everything. And it was a thrill to ride home from the upper field on top of this big load of hay in the wagon. And many times, if it didn't get put in the barn that day, my brother and I, we'd go take our blankets and we'd go sleep up on top of the hay load in the moonlight. Some good memories of that. And many times we used to sleep in the hayloft. And my dad had this old pickup truck from the 40s, and in the early 50s, it was a treat to be right in the back of the truck if my dad was going to town and get some grain, and we all ride in the back, and you're standing up in the back with the wind blowing in your face, and you can't do that nowadays. You have to have seatbelts, but we did that back in the early 50s. And I was about 2.5 years old, and I had fallen out of the truck, and I had cut my head open real bad. It knocked me out, so I don't remember it, but and I asked my mother, I got this scar here, and she told me the story that I'd fallen out. And she had told Dad that we gotta bring him to the hospital. And my dad said we can't afford it. So being unconscious, my dad shaves my head with the cattle clippers. And he pours rubbing alcohol on it and tapes my scalp together. And so subconsciously, I could never go to a men's barber shop after that. I'd freak out when the clippers come near me because of the subconsciously the buzzing of those cattle clippers there that totally freaked me out. I was in a trauma. So I always had to go to a beauty parlor and get my hair wet cut. Even then, when they take the electric trimmers and they trim the back of it, I kind of cringe a little bit. But after putting the pieces together of this, I was able to overcome most of it now. But still, I get a little cringing when I hear electric clippers come near me. Shaving doesn't bother me because I'm in control of the shaver. I'm holding the shaver. The women in my household growing up, my mother and my two sisters, were always on the high-strung side. In fact, my oldest sister, Esther, if there was a Living Bra commercial on TV, she'd have to block the TV like this so we couldn't see it. It was nasty stuff, she called it. Well, one day she was opening a can of beans in the kitchen. She was turning the key in, and she's kind of saying like, "Oh, when I get older, I'm going to have 5 kids and everything." And I says, "What do you mean, Esther? You don't like nasty stuff?" Well, with the can of the lid, the can open, she whips it at me, and it cut into my head too, near the scar where I got thrown out of the truck.
Of course, on the meat side of things, we did raise some pigs and had beef, but my dad was also the fence minder for the town. And in other words, his responsibility to, if someone's cows get out, whatever, make sure that these people repair their fence. He was also the one who was responsible for stray animals, dog catcher essentially, and also responsible for roadkill. And I understand my mom confessed years later that a lot of the stuff we grew up with was not pork, was not beef, but it was roadkill.
Maybe it was my 7th birthday. I wanted a dog so bad for my birthday. I had figurines of dogs, and I was greeted by a hound dog at the foot of the stairs when I got up that morning on my birthday. And the dog has lapped my face, and I'm hugging this dog and thanking Mom and Dad for the dog. And my dad was a dog officer in town, and I had to go out in the night to get this stray, brought it back to the farm. And I thought it was my birthday present, but he said we have to find a home for this dog, and we can't keep it. So I was a little upset there. And later that year, my brother got a dog on his birthday, and he got his dog and I didn't get mine, and I found that I didn't like that dog. When I was 5 years old, my mother took a job at Barry Wool Company in Barry, Mass, to give us kids a good Christmas, which we never really had. So we were showered with all kinds of gifts. And when she did that, they couldn't afford a babysitter for me. Well, I wasn't in school yet. And my dad worked for Alan Slongwhite in East Princeton, where he built houses. So he gave me a lunchbox like my dad's, and I packed up our lunch, and I went to work with my dad for almost a year, building houses. So my job was the fireman, they called me. When I pick up the trash and everything, and when I got the fireplace built in the house there, I was feeding all the trash in the fireplace, burning the rubbish. And I got to see a house from the foundation being poured right up until the opening house where the new owners had a party for all the workers that built this house. So I always sit there and for hours and watching them staple the insulation in. Back then it was gold bond insulation, which was shredded newspaper and craft paper that they put in the walls. They didn't have fiberglass yet. So I got to see the workings of building a house, and I built some awesome tree houses as a kid. Some really good ones. And even today in my married life, I built an addition on the house, and I knew how to do it. Just from watching it, I remember all that like it was yesterday, watching them build that house. And my mother used to come home from work 10:30 at night, and my job was to bring the trash down the bottom of the hill. And this one day I forgot to bring the trash out, and she came up in my bedroom, grabbed me by the hair and pulled me out of the bed onto the floor in a sound sleep. She said, "Bring the trash down," and I forgot to do it. And ever since then I had to put locks on the bedroom door, and she said, "We don't put locks on that door in this house." I said, "Well, I do." The animals got better attention than I did, and if I got cut or hurt, it seemed like I was less value to them. And if I stepped on a rusty nail, and I go to the house and told my mother, my dad was swearing cuss at me, you damn fool, and you shouldn't be near those boards anyway, and this and that. So I remember I stepped on a rusty nail. I was in the sand pile that we had there when they built the barn at the farm, and I got a bleeding from the rusty nail, and I'm plaguing it with sand, and I'm frustrated. I'm trying to stop the bleeding, and my mother comes around the corner and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to stop the bleeding." I was trying to hide it so that Dad won't see that I stepped on a rusty nail. We had to hide my pain, my wounds. I couldn't tell them. My brother Larry, he got cut one time, and I remember he was screaming bloody murder. I'm leaking. It was a hot summer day where he cut on the forehead, and the dripping blood there, and he just went into panic, and they took care of him. My mother told me several times, she pulled me aside and said that Dad was much harder on me because I looked like his father, who took off and abandoned the family when he was 3 years old. And I had the curly hair, I kind of resemble him. In fact, years later, my dad gave me his picture and says, "You might as well have this, you look like the son of a bitch." And overall it was safe at the farm, but my dad had this bug sprayer. It was a cylinder with a tube on it, and you had this pump that you had to spray this poison. And my job was to take this poison and spray it on all the cows were in the stanchions in the barn, and I had to spray the essence of the cows there to keep the flies off them, and it was DDT. So as a young boy, I'm spraying this thing all the way up and down, spraying all 28 cows that we had in the barn. I think it was 23 cows with this DDT. And this contractor my dad worked for building houses, he gave my dad this whole case of asbestos, the soft asbestos. So my dad bought a wood burning furnace that we had in the basement, and all the ductwork was hot air that just kind of went up from the furnace and heated the house. We lined the pipe that went up there all with asbestos to kind of insulate it. And my job was to take the asbestos and shred it in a pail, and with water I'd kind of work the asbestos and shred it up into little pieces and make a clay out of it. And then my folks there, they patted around the pipe there, and when it dried it was like all sealed insulated pipe. And making handmade gifts for everybody, we took the asbestos, and my mother had a wooden bowl, and I used to pat the asbestos around the bowl and everything. Then we put it in the oven and bake it so that it would dry. And then we peel the asbestos off the bowl, and then we sand the edges of it and everything, and then we paint this bowl, give it a couple coats of paint. And then we'd also take a Campbell soup can. This is a Campbell soup can now. You put the asbestos around there, and then when you put things and texture it, bang on it and get a little texture on it, and press this to make designs. And then we bake this in the oven. And it comes out, this is all asbestos wrapped around a Campbell soup can. And this thing you put on your desk, and you put pencils and pens in it, like that. And we made candlestick holders and all this stuff. And these were our Christmas presents that we gave to our aunts and uncles and family. And of course we had a good work ethic working on the farm. All the hard work and everything. That when I turned 16 years old and got my first job, I knew what work was, and never was disciplined for not being a good worker. I was always a hard worker, and I think growing up on the farm there and all the work we had to do, I was responsible that I am. And I remember Thanksgiving dinner. I remember one Thanksgiving there. Everything on the table was grown and raised on the farm, except the salt and pepper. The chicken we ate, instead of turkey there, that was, we grew that, and all the vegetables. It's kind of a neat feeling and a rewarding feeling, farming and being able to do that. I wanted to be a farmer. In fact, I always loved wearing the jeans and the plaid shirts, and kind of looked like Clark Kent series there when he was growing up on the farm. I wanted that image. And one day it was January. My mother was ordering the seeds for the upcoming planting season. She asked me, "Would you like to grow a garden there? I'm ordering seeds." I said, "I'd like to grow popcorn." So my mother brought me some popcorn seed, and I got all these coffee cans that I put the soil in it and I brought to school, and the whole length of the classroom in the 4th grade I put growing my popcorn. Then the school kitchen, they used to get these big cans that they vegetables and stuff for the school lunches there. They gave me all these empty cans and put soil in those, and the entire classroom length was full of cans growing popcorn. So come spring there in May, one of the teachers helped me bring all these cans home, and I transplanted them in my garden and harvested a beautiful crop of popcorn. And I peeled the husk back and everything. I hung it up in the barn to dry. I remember the next day I went out there to admire my crop, and I noticed it was gone. I asked my dad, he says, "Where's my popcorn?" He said, "I fed it to the pigs." My dad, "Well, it's not going to pop anyway," he said. And I remember going up in the hayloft and I cried a bit. And I hated farming ever since that. And that was very painful for me. We did a lot of swimming. In the hot weather, we went to the beach almost every day. Went to the Riding Gun Club or the Lithuanian Club. And then we'd ride our bikes there. We weren't too far to travel. We went to the Lithuanian Club there. We'd have to travel by the Garden Airport. And many times running barefooted on the runway was pretty hot. Cause back then, most of the time we were barefooted all summer. We just save our good shoes for Sunday and school. In winter time, sledding was a big thing. We all had our sleds, and my parents did make sure that we all had sleds and bicycles. And sledding was a big thing, that we had some good trails that could go over almost a mile, through the woods and through trails and fields and everything. Good memories of sledding, especially in the moonlight. I remember many a moonlit night going out there sledding. And even in the summertime, we all had our bicycles that we just ride around the neighborhood and the hills and ride our bicycles in the moonlight. And I got some good memories of that. Years ago, when they shoveled the gutters in the barn, dumped it down the chute through the barn floor, and all the common manure would build up down here. There'd be a major runoff here, and especially when it rains, there'd be about 3 feet of storage from the cow manure and water. When I was a little boy, I was throwing rocks at these tiger swallowtail butterflies. My dad caught me, and he made me crawl down into the pit to pull the rocks out that were plugging it up. So I was bending down to get a rock. I was up to here in cow manure. When I came up, I was drowned from the neck down. And my dad worked for this Alan Sloan-White in East Princeton. And they had his wife ran a restaurant across the street, a kind of a truck stop restaurant in East Princeton. It's still there. And inside it has the knotty pine paneling. That was done the same time Alan Sloan-White helped my dad put knotty pine in a room at the farm. And, they got rid of this old big brass antique cash register, and they gave it to my sister and I so we can play store. And, a good sized cash register. And we're having fun with it. And my mother's calling scrap dealers and got some junk guy down and sold it for $5 for brass or bronze scrap. So we didn't get to keep it. And later that year, we used to go to the Tumpton Dump and Hubbardston Dump picking for junk and find some good stuff in the dump. Back then they didn't cover it over landfill like they do today. And at the bottom of the big hill, I found a big brass bronze cash register and took all my strength to get up to the top of the hill and got it up to the car and asked my mother to help me get in the car. And there's another guy in there that was looking for brass and copper, and she sold it to him for $3. I didn't get to keep that one. Again, my aunt and uncles would give me birthday cards, Christmas cards, and there'd be money in it. It could be $2, it might be a $5 bill. But, back in the mid-50s, that was a lot of money for a kid at my age at that time. I never got to keep the money. My mother would take it and say that, let me put that away safe, you're going to lose it, and I never saw it again. So I remember one day I asked my aunt, I said, I wish you'd buy me something because you give me money, I never get to keep it. I wonder how my parents felt when I said that. Another time, we had the outhouse in the back shed. It was bitter cold in the winter, and the wasp greeted you in hot weather. So one day we were over there for a Sunday dinner. We went up there many times after we had Sunday dinner over there. And they had a flush toilet, and it looked real old. I asked my uncle, I says, hey Howard, how old is this toilet? He says, maybe 50 years old. I looked at my mom and dad. I says, "Well, how come we don't have one?" And it was shortly afterwards there that my dad installed a flush toilet in the house. We didn't have to go out into the outhouse where the wind was blowing through the cracks of the boards. You drop the toilet paper down the hole. There's a two-seater there, and I can't imagine sitting in that house with somebody else while you're going. But you throw the paper down the hole, and the wind blew it up the other hole. It was cold. I remember really young. I'd go up in the attic and do my thing up there. It was just too damn cold out in the outhouse. We got our first toilet when I was 6 years old. If one of the cows in the barn was sick, my dad got the veterinarian there right away to take care of things. And I remember the dog getting porcupine quills and him bringing it to the vet, having removed. But yet when I cut my head open, it was going to cost too much, so they did his own doctoring. So the animals always got better care and attention than I did. And because of that, I started becoming abusive to the animals. I was kind of jealous that the animals got better attention than me. And, I've done a few things I'm kind of ashamed of. Growing up with my brother getting his dog and I didn't. It wasn't for years later that, in my married life, and my kids were real little, a neighbor's kitten came wandering in the yard. My son picks it up and he's holding and loving up this kitten. And I'm watching him, I says, how come he can do that and I can't? So that's got me really thinking, puzzling why I can't. And that's when I started writing my journals. And putting the pieces together, my wife said that I can see why you're abusive to animals, that they got better attention than you did. And once I realized that, I was able to correct that problem. And now we have dogs and we've had cats, and then I wasn't abusive anymore. So it's interesting how the way you were brought up and things you went through affects you in your adult life. You need to write about it, go back and find out why you do certain things. Growing up on a farm, there was a lot of hard work. We were cheap child labor, you might say. And a lot of good times. Weeding the garden was a family effort. And many times my two brothers and I would work out in the yard while the ladies fixed an awesome meal. And we ate good. We had fresh garden vegetables. Later years, my parents sowed vegetable plants in the spring. In the fall, they sold the vegetables. And one story, my dad worked at Wainroy. Many times the guys would follow him home from work to get sweet corn. One day my dad was having the septic tank pumped out and he had the lid pulled off and it was dragged away from the tank so they can pump it out. When the guy said, "Hey Wally, what's with your septic tank? How come the lid is over here?" He said, "I've been flushing home brew down the toilet for years, and one day she blew." Well, that story went all over town that Kangas' septic tank blew up from the fermentation of the home brew they kept flushing down the toilet. One time Reverend Jaffa from the Unitarian Church came over for Sunday dinner after church, and the home brew down cellar was exploding. So when one bottle goes, many times it triggers a chain reaction of a bunch of it blowing up. So, "What's that, Walt?" And he says, "Rats are having a hell of a time down there." So we used to make home brew. They made every other week. They made double batches. They had these stone crocks that they had on this bureau in the bathroom, and it was kind of, I call it depression beer, where they put mold the yeast and hops and malt, and they cook it. And they put in these crocks and they put yeast in it, and stuff with foam over the top, and had a stench there, a smell that was. You had to bear every time you go to the bathroom. You had to put up with that. I was the capper. My job from very early on, I capped the bottles. Had to take a spoonful of sugar in each bottle and then you cap it. And then you laid it on its side behind the stove in the kitchen for a few days, and then it was put in the hallway and later brought down cellar. And many times stuff would explode there carrying it. And my sister got some really bad cuts from the bottles blowing up when she had to go get more beer. One time I was going upstairs to my bedroom, and just before I got to the hallway, my mother called me. I turned around, and that second, all the beer blew up in the hallway. Went all over the walls and broke glass everywhere. Now, I used to make these little dogs here, and Toivo Matto, the neighbor next door, he had a jigsaw in his garage, and I used to go down there and jigsaw these out, and then take my pocket knife and whittle them, and I'd take a file in here and make it so I can separate the four legs. And I used to sell these in the village for 50 cents a piece. And I made other breeds, some a little more elaborate that I'd varnish and everything, and I get about up to $2.50 for those. So I was always kind of making this kind of thing, and I was so excited getting this jigsaw that my uncle gave me, so I don't have to use the neighbors. And the night I got it, I was on the sun porch there and jigging out stuff. And I used to make these little boxes about this big that holds the carton of cigarettes, and you pull one pack out and they drop down, and I had stencil designs on them or wood burn designs, and I was selling them in a drugstore in South Gardner. So I was out there cutting the wood the night I got the saw, and my dad comes out. Thought he was going to check out, see what I'm doing, and he takes the belt off the motor and he starts whipping me with it. I said, "What'd you do that for?" He says, "I can't watch my damn television with you running this thing all night." So why couldn't he just say shut off for the night? No, that's the way he was. I never got a warning for stepping out of line. In fact, even in the school system in Hubbardston, one day I was walking in from recess, and principal, Mr. Grandin, grabbed me and threw me up against the door of the gym and says, "Go stand by the office for the rest of the day." Well, what'd you do that for? I said, "Stand by the office." So when it come time to go home, I ran and jumped on the bus and went home. Then they got my parents down there to tell them that I won't stay after school. I refused to. And I said they won't tell me why. So they said that I threw a rock at somebody and they keep me after school for a week because of that, which I never threw a rock. So this went on for years. Now, Hubbardston was a small town grammar school. We had 251 students in 8 grades. We didn't have a regional junior high yet. So I was in the 3rd grade, and my sister Nancy was in the 5th grade, and she had an argument with her teacher. And shortly after, the teacher dropped dead of a heart attack. Nancy was suspended from school, labeled teacher killer, and I was the brother of the teacher killer. So from 3rd grade to the 8th grade, there was major persecution, where everyone was kicking me, spitting on me, and throwing me in the dirt. So I was constantly hitchhiking home from school. Many times they would purposely keep me there, so when my dad's coming home from work, I'd miss him, and I'd have to get out walking and hitchhiking. So it was in the 8th grade when he told me to stay after school, and I was hitchhiking home, and a pervert picks me up and tried to make advances at me, and I got away from the situation, but I said to myself, I ain't staying after school for any crimes I never committed. So if I was in the classroom and Mr. Grandin comes in and says, "Okay, you can go home now." I says, I took one of these drawing compasses, you probably remember them, with a pencil on it, and I snapped it off here, and I bent this and I made a ring out of it, like that. And Mr. Grandin came in and said, "You can go home now." And I said, boy, when I says, "Mr. Grandin, you've been keeping me after school since the 3rd grade, and for rocks and stuff I threw at kids, which I never did. And right now, they're sitting on Wheeler's Corner, and the minute I walk out that front door, they're going to kick me, spit on me, and throw me in the dirt. The first one that comes near me is getting this." He said, "That's an assault and battery." I says, "I don't care. I'm not staying after school for something I never did." And he told me, "Gary, wait 5 minutes before you go out." And I waited 5 minutes. He went out and must have ran out to his car. And when I walked out that front door, the gang is coming and said, "Kangas, let's get him, let's get him." So Grandin bombing up Main Street in his car. He drives up on the sidewalk on the grass between the boys and me. He told the boys to go home. He gave me a ride home that night and never kept me after school again. Yeah, this is a swing that's on the grammar school at Center School when I was growing up. I was in the 3rd grade when I was shimmying up the pipe that's on the end, that's coming out diagonally on the end. All boys like to shimmy up pipes, and I was shimmying up that pipe and got almost to the top when the teacher called me down, get down from there, sent me to the office. And the principal was Gramellini at the time, and he took his belt off and started whipping me with it up in the principal's office for doing that. And it's like, why couldn't they say, "Get down, don't do that"? Again, I got the whip because I did it. Well, growing up on a dairy farm, my dad had to have 23 cows that were producing milk at all times. If a cow went dry, he'd have to trade it in and so much money to get a new cow that was milking. And there was this cattle dealer, Goodwin. I think it was Earl Goodwin. And he'd come to the house and take the dry cows away and give us fresh cows, and we wouldn't deal with my dad. And he used to tell me as a young boy, I was like 4, 5, 6 years old when this was going on. He says, "You're a good-looking boy. I want to take you home with me." And seeing him struggling with these cows, the cows did not want to get into the truck, but I see the cows fighting to not go in, and him saying, "I want to take you home with me," that put a fear of me that every time he came, I'd go hide up in the hayloft behind the barn somewhere until he's gone. My parents lived from paycheck to paycheck, so growing up, money was really tight. So there wasn't much money there for come Christmas time and birthday. So we made a lot of gifts for each other. That's when I took up wood carving and painting and wood burning at a very early age. And I remember my sisters, they took a chest with a rounded top on it and they glued a road map all over it and then varnished it so that with yellow and looked like an old pirate's map. And wood burning, this is actually the magnifying glass that I use there. I could hold in the sun and the sun would shine through here and I could burn a design right into the wood. And I made several of these wood burn plaques. In fact, the Hubbardston Library commissioned me to make a plaque about this big that's still up in the library with said Hubbardston Public Library and the hours. And I was getting cross-eyed real bad from using this thing. My mother bought me one of these electric burning irons that you plug in and you can burn, and that wasn't the same, so I kind of lost interest in wood burning and got more into the wood carving. One time my dad was doing some plumbing down cellar and he wanted me to help him, and I had this board that I was holding a piece of pipe up so he can solder it. And out of boredom there, I'm sitting and waiting until he needs me. And a friend of mine up the road, Bud Tracy, left a toy army gun over, and I traced his gun on a piece of wood that I was using to hold the pipe, and I carved this out of a piece of wood. So I took a hand saw and I cut it, and then a jackknife and I whittled it. So I got like a gun here and put a rawhide strap on it. We used to play army and all kinds of things, and a lot of toys we made by hand ourselves. And I know it's never much for playing with regular toys. If I got one of those friction cars that you push and it goes, I'd be amused for about 5-10 minutes, and then I'd have to take it apart to see what made it work and see the mechanics of it. I was 6 years old when my aunt in Templeton gave me a book on the early inventors. And one was a Greek scientist who built the first steam engine. It was a ball that had steam jets on it, and they had to have a fire under this thing to heat the water. Well, I built this thing behind the shed here, and I was using newspaper to get the fire going. And I ran in the house to get more newspaper and come back out, the cornfield's on fire. So I'm running back and forth from the barn with buckets of water. Larry comes home from school, and he's helping me put the fire out. We got it out. And we pulled my dad put grass and hay around the plants to mulch it. And we pulled all this burnt hay and the burnt stalks, and we ditched them under the barn. We get some fresh hay and we put it around the plants. So to this day, my dad thinks that the porcupines had a hell of a time eating his crop. Well, when I was in the 6th grade, I started to learn how to play the harmonica. And I was doing poorly in all my other classes, and they took my music classes away because I was doing good in this, that they wanted me to spend more time on the classes that I was doing bad in. In science there, we studied different phases of science, and the segment that we did worked on electricity. I was fascinated with electricity, and I got an A on that. And they took my science class away because I was so doing good in it. So that didn't really make any sense to me. Then my aunt, Hilma in Templeton, she was going to give me $20 for every A I get, $15 for every B, and $10 for every C I get, and $5 for every D. And still that didn't improve my grades. Something with a visual handicap there, it was tough burning out so fast after a short time reading. When I was very young, we're watching the movie The Birdman of Alcatraz. This man was sentenced to life in prison, and he was making bird cages with cutting the boards with razor blades. He was just cutting these boards, and then he was doing research with birds. In fact, he got to be friends with the warden and bought him a microscope so he can do his research. I remember saying to my mother, well, that must take a long time cutting that wood with a razor blade. So my mother gave me this illustration. She took a board and a nail, and she scratched the nail across the board like that. And Gary says, have the patience of life of the one nail cutting through that board. You will eventually saw your way through it. A saw has a bunch of nails that when you cut through it does it much faster. But have the patience in life of that one nail cutting that board, and you will cut it, but have the patience that it will be done. Like I said, I used to always like to take my toys apart and see what made them tick. I was in second grade when the 8th grade class gave out this biography of Thomas Edison. It was kind of in comic book form, and kids were throwing them all over the bus, and I grabbed a few copies of them and went home and read the story of Thomas Edison. And kind of fascinated with it, and I wanted to be like him, an inventor. And so I always had a room in the house growing up that I called the laboratory. And I was tinkering with science, and I always had a hard time in school there due to bad vision. Second grade, my aunt brings me up in her attic. We used to go over there for Sunday dinner a lot. And she had an Edison phonograph up there with a big horn and selling the records. And she cranked this thing up and she plays me a record. She said, "Gary, Thomas Edison gave me this phonograph personally." She used to be a cleaning lady for the Edison family in Orange, New Jersey, years ago. And she gave me this book. It was about that thick, one of the best biographies of Thomas Edison. So at 7 years old, I read that biography and kind of really changed my thinking of life and what I wanted to do. And first grade, I did excellent. I was probably one of the top brightest students in the class, the teacher told my mother. In second grade, I passed only because I did extremely well in the first grade. And I'd read about 2 minutes and my eyes were really burnt out. The school nurse examined me and said that you need to see an eye doctor. I came home and told my dad and mom that they want me to see an eye doctor. My dad swore and cussed that it was going to cost money for me to go for an eye test. That I never brought it up again until my freshman year in high school when I was having trouble in school, and my dad said, "What the hell is your problem?" And I says, "Well, they told me when I was 7 years old I needed glasses." And like that. And that was the first eye test I had my freshman year in high school, the first time I went for an eye exam. And my eyes have never been able to be corrected. In fact, I graduated high school without probably reading a single book. The teacher would review the answers the day before, and next day I'd pass the test. I never was an A student, but I made it through high school, graduated, and taken several college classes since. I went into television producing and directing, but when I was offered for a job when I finished those studies, it was half of what I was making in my career as a packaging engineer, so this television stuff has only been a hobby for me, and I made extra money on the side with it. It's been fun. But having the laboratory in my bedroom, I had what I call mission control. I had a tape deck and radios and CBs, and I bought 25 reel-to-reel tape players, brand new, from a junk shop, but none of them worked. But I took the microphones from each one and I placed them all over the house, and I had wires going up into my bedroom. And I had this headset I could put on and listen to a rotary switch, kitchen, living room, dining room, bathroom, and like that. I could tap in on any room in the house pretty much and hear what's going on in the conversation. And my dad, if he calls me, "Gary, get up," and I didn't get up, I'm going to have to get cold water thrown in my face and a sound sleep. So I wired the kitchen radio. I ran wires from the speaker of the kitchen radio up through the attic, up and down into my room. And a little speaker by my bed so that when my dad comes to my dad would turn the radio on in the morning and then get the coffee going. And when the coffee's ready, he'd call me, "Gary, get up." But meanwhile, I heard the radio speaker go off there because he turned the radio on, and that would wake me up ahead of time. So I never had that encounter with Dad. My mother loved 78 records, which I collected them as a young boy and 6 years old. And I used to play these records up in my room later and play them down through the kitchen radio. And my mother never knew if there was a radio on or was I playing my records upstairs. Now, this was, I was in high school at this time. And one day my dad was swearing and cussing up a storm down in the kitchen. So I turned on that microphone that was recording in the kitchen. I recorded onto my reel-to-reel tape player. And when he was done cussing, I played it back through the kitchen radio. So then I heard these footsteps stomping up the stairs, and my dad came up and pulled my plug on me. Ripped all the wires out of the wall that I had going all over the house. But I always liked to tinker with things. I made radars and x-ray. I made an x-ray machine in high school by accident. I was putting different gases in vacuum tubes and putting electrodes in there, and then different things would happen. Mercury would give off a bluish glow, and sparks would fly out. And argon gas that was kind of giving it a greenish glow, and it was an X-ray machine. So, physics teacher pulled my plug, and I had to read the biography of Rontgen, who in 1895 invented it and killed himself with it. So, did a lot of experiments. I made rockets. Freshman year in high school, I made a rocket, 6-foot rocket that I launched, and the thing just burst into flames on the ballpark in East Tilton. Fire trucks had to come and put my fire out. One time I was making a bomb for Halloween, and I went and bought all the matches in Ocean's Restaurant in East Tilton and Don's Market. Bought all that matches, and I came home. I'm cutting all the heads off and putting them into a Moxie soda bottle, and we set that off in the field in East Tilton. A big ring of fire there from all the matches blowing off. Next day at school, second period class, they had the local police, state police, Massachusetts Fireworks and Corruption, and some other people, superintendent of schools or whatever, came and escorted me out of my classroom. They wanted to know where the bomb was in a junior high locker, and I didn't know anything about that. Somebody started a rumor about that. In high school, I had one of these round chemistry bottles with a long neck on it, and I was asking the physics teacher that he was explaining sodium, if you put that in water it explodes, calcium. And so I put calcium in this bottle, and it was displacing the hydrogen from the oxygen in the water, and I put an electrode on it and a Tesla coil, and I went to turn that on, and the hydrogen and oxygen was building up in this bottle, and I was doing this on the kitchen table at home. I was home alone, and the bottle exploded, and it hit me in the chest like that, and the rest of it shattered across the room. And I kind of stunned there like not a scratch on me, but whoa, God kept that whole side of that bottle intact when it hit me. And told the physics teacher that you didn't tell me the hydrogen was in there too, and that exploded. So I was kind of banned from doing my experiments in the physics lab at school after hearing that story. That time I built a flying machine, a glider. I took a pair of skis that my great-grandfather made in his blacksmith shop. I built a glider on it with a like 20-foot wingspan and everything. And I dragged this thing in the wintertime all the way to East Tilton, and we took it up this 200-foot sandbank. And the sandbank went down, and there was a little hump, and then went down again. Well, I'm in this thing, and I'm going down the hill, and I hit the first hump, and I'm airborne, and I kind of curve around, and I smack against the side of the sandbank, and it's sliding all like this, in circles all the way to the bottom there. I didn't get hurt, but boy, I was airborne for a few seconds there. It was very memorable. Kind of an oxymoron that I have a barber's chair in my office that I recline in and do my work. I got my computer here that I'm writing my books in, and I just sit here and do my work. And I always had rivals growing up, and when I was in the 6th grade, there was a poster contest, Be Kind to Animal Week, and everybody in the class did a poster commemorating that, and they put them all on the blackboard up in front of the room, and every student had 3 votes. So you got a piece of chalk, and you put a chalk mark by 3 pen. You got to pick 3 posters to go to Boston for the state competition. I remember I voted for a rival of mine. I voted for his because I thought he did a very good job, and after he told me I voted for yours because you voted for mine. But mine didn't get enough votes from the rest of the class to be accepted to be submitted by the teacher. So the teacher said to the class, I know Gary's didn't get enough votes to go to Boston, but I want to send his because I think it's very good. And there was a boo in the class, everyone said. I took 3rd place in the state. So this is a medal that I got for an award for that poster. In the 6th grade, I did an oil painting of the nation's capital out of oil, and it was the day before the competition. It was the deadline, the last day to do it, and so I had it drying on the chalkboard. It was still wet oil paint, and somebody either ran a pencil or their fingernails across it and defaced it. So the teacher says, well, it's too late, today's the deadline. So I touched it up with my finger, all the little scrapes on it. I was fixing it with my finger painting it to finish it up, touch it up, and they wouldn't let me do it, but I won 2nd place at that show. And then I did this wood carving of Abraham Lincoln out of a tabletop. I carved it with a razor blade, jackknife, and a can opener I used to carve the wood. I didn't have chisels at that time. And then this painting here I did in oil. The scene there in the seascape. along the ocean, and I entered those in the art contest in the 8th grade, and they disqualified me. They put a special exhibit. They wouldn't let me enter it in the competition. I think they didn't believe that I made them or did them. When I was in the 8th grade, 1966, they had a competition statewide there. It's called the Science Countdown, where 7th and 8th graders across the state would compete, and the winner of all the science questions answered would take this whole day test, and if they passed this test, they go on this TV show called Science Countdown. Well, I won the Science Countdown in Hubbardston Grammar School, giving the wrong answer even. I'd gotten a walkie-talkie for Christmas, and it said it traveled so many meters. So I asked my teacher, Mr. Grandin, how long is a meter? He told me 39 inches. So when it came months later for the Science Countdown, that question came up, how long is a meter? So nobody in the class could answer it, and came to me. Mr. Grandin was throwing numbers at me, 37, 36, 39, like that, and everything, so I'd get confused. Well, I said 39 inches. And he stopped right there. He said to the class, he says, Gary just gave me the wrong answer, but I have to give it to him as the right answer. It's actually 39.37 inches, the length of a meter. And I told Gary 39 inches, so I have to give him that answer. Is it correct? When I was 16 years old, I got my first job, and I bought a Seaberg jukebox. The record changing mechanism wasn't working, but it had the amplifier in there. And I bought another jukebox amplifier, so I had these two amplifiers on top of each other in the cabinet of this old jukebox. And it had a huge speaker there that was powered by these amplifiers. It was like 645 watts each amplifier. So I used to go to the town dump and rip speakers out of radios and TV sets, and the beams in my room there, I aligned 28 speakers I put along these beams in my bedroom, all wired up to these amplifiers. And this thing was so powerful that it was transmitting a half a mile up the road through Channel 5. Like the neighbors called and said that I'm hearing your music through my TV, and I didn't believe them, so I put some records on there. I had a record changer in there that can play regular records, and rode my bike up the road, and sure enough, my music was coming through Channel 5. When there was I was in high school, I think my 9th or 10th grade, when some of my buddies in East Elmton came down. One of them had this mini bike. It looked like a miniature motorcycle. And a person in Gardner that was selling them for $279 back then. And oh, I wanted one so bad. I was riding it up the road and everything, and I wanted a mini bike, so I was going to sell some of my wood cabins to get a mini bike. So my parents were selling plants and vegetables, and I had all my wood cabins up there on the steps, and anybody, every time a customer came, I'd say, yeah, interested in a wood cabin. So I sold a wood cabin for $75. So I had an album with all the pictures of my different wood cabins, and with $75 in my pocket, I hitchhiked to Gardner. And the first place I go was a lawnmower fix-it shop up in Union Square. And I said, you got any mini bikes? I said, no, we just have snow blowers and lawnmowers. And kind of disappointed, sad look on my face, walking out. The guy said, wait a minute, come here. I got a mini bike in the back that I was going to fix up for my son, but I'll never get to it. So I got the mini bike for $75, and he picked out a wood carving in my book, also that I gave him. And then he gave me a ride home with the mini bike in the back of the truck. So I got my mini bike that way. I remember in 10th grade, I woke up in the morning, I had a dream that I missed the bus, and I walked up the road and found a tree in my dad's field up in Templeton. And I started carving a 12-foot Indian out of this big tree, a big huge Indian with a limb, with a hand raised and everything. So waking up from this dream, I realized I did miss the bus. So I walked up there, both my folks were working, and went up there. I found a tree that would make a good Indian. Right after my dream, I did this. I called the tree warden in Templeton to get permission to cut the tree down. And before he got down there, I already started carving it. So it took me almost 2 years carving this huge Indian. And strange that I dreamt it before I did it, and I went up and did it. I started quabbing my freshman year in 1967, and I signed up for the art class. The art teacher asked everyone in the class to bring in some artwork that they've done in the past. So I brought my panel I did of Abraham Lincoln, and I told him I carved it with a jackknife and a razor blade and a can opener. So he introduced me to some wood carving chisels. For the first time I ever used good chisels. So My freshman year, these are some of the log carvings that I've done in my freshman year, and here's my art teacher, James Fortune, who was staying with me there after we brought him home and put him on the lawn at the farm. That year I carved the Quabbin Panther, and I donated that to the school. They had it in the office for a while, and one morning I went into the art room and it was on my bench. And that teacher wanted it out of there. Didn't want it to stay in the school. So he was working on some relief carvings, and in 11th and 12th grade I was doing more relief carving. And this picture was in the yearbook the year before I graduated as the Quabbin woodcarver. By the time I was going to school, the drug scene was really, in that time, was strong. And I kind of rebelled against the drug scene. I was kind of an outcast because I didn't want anything to do with the drugs. I was determined never to take them. My mother, when I was 5 years old, I was chasing a cat through the house, and the cat ran under her bed, and I went running under there to grab this cat. When I came out of the other side, my mother was changing, and she told me to sit down. And she gave me a lecture about drugs, age 5 here. That some drugs you smoke like a cigarette, some are like candy, and you get addicted to those, and you have to get something you have to inject. And if you ever get on drugs and go to prison, I'm only going to visit you twice a year, on Christmas and your birthday. So she put the fear of God in me about drugs that I was never going to touch them. When I was showing my physics teacher some experiments that I was doing, I made a metal detector, an Army ammo can, and one of these copper parabolic heaters I mounted on it, and with the amplifier I had a feedback with speakers and the microphone and the thing, and it actually detected metal. So I brought this to school and demonstrated for the physics teacher, and he says, Kangas, if you want to build something practical, why don't you build a computer that plays tic-tac-toe? And I got thought about it, and I came up with a computer with 120 relays to run it. It wins every time. You make the first move anywhere on the 9 squares, and the computer would take the next move and win. So from the phone company junk there, I got some junk relays that I used to build this thing. In 1970, the Boston Globe was sponsoring a statewide art contest for high schools. And I was going to submit this wooden chest, and the art teacher said it was too heavy. You couldn't ship it. The deadline was yesterday. So I boxed up and I brought it to the front office, and they mailed it out for me. And I won the certificate of merit in the show. Now, I was the first one on the bus and the last one off the school bus. So that's an hour each way. And you figure the school day is 6 hours long. So they're spending 2 hours a day riding this bus. So I used to put logs in the back of the bus, and smaller carvings, I'd be carving them in the bus. I'd have the front seat, and because I was the first one on, and I'd be carving, and the bus driver gave me a wastebasket and a dustpan brush to clean up my wood chips. So I did a lot of wood carving in that school bus over the 4 years that I went to Quabbin. My first 2 years at Quabbin High School, I was doing more log sculpturing. And our teacher was giving me an A in the beginning, and then I was carving this lion. I had it roughed out, and the art teacher comes in and says, leave it like that, and you get an A. And I said, okay, give me the A and let me finish it. So I carved the details of the eyes and the hair on it and everything, and next thing I knew, the art teacher opened the art room window and threw it out the window and busted some of the legs off of it. He says, you don't carve a lion, you carve shapes to represent it. Well, I started getting conflict of this sort, and next thing I knew, I was being removed from the art room. I wasn't allowed to go in there. So I go to the principal's office, and they said that all you want to do is carve, they said. That I want you to do a painting and a stone sculpture and something in ceramics. And if you want to go back to wood carving, go ahead. So I was going to do a painting, and I brought in a 4 by 8 foot sheet of masonite. I was going to paint the end time prophecies of the Bible and paint a painting of it. So they said it was going to cost too much money for the gesso, so I got some white paint from the wood shop and I put the base coat on. And then they said that's going to take too much paint, so my brother let me borrow his oil paints, so I brought those in and I was painting this picture. And as it started to take shape, kids are kind of curious to what the subject matter was, and I was asked to have it removed from the school, that it was a bad representation of school artwork, that it was kind of a grotesque subject. So then I did a stone sculpture. I did a few of those, and I went back into wood carving. But then I was carving these Masonic plaques for the Masonic Lodge in Athol that they hung on their walls of people that contributed, they got their names in gold on these plaques. There's one for the Masonic and one for the Evening Stars. So I carved these 2 plaques, and later I carved 2 more for them. And when they found out the money I was making on these plaques, they said they didn't want me to do artwork, that I was making more money than the art teacher. So I was always in conflict with the school, and even my 3rd year we got a new art teacher, and everything was fine and cool in the beginning, and then she was on my case about every little detail, that my relief carvings weren't deep enough and all. But overall, Quabbin was a really good school to go to. It was good for me, and I got away from the nightmare of the grammar school there. It was a whole new bunch of kids. And I graduated, and it was a very good program they had there. Growing up with this paranoia of being snuck up on, it went right into my adult life, where I'd be in the lab making a prototype, and I'd be cutting with a knife, and I'd turn around, there's my boss, and I'd jump, and the knife would fly out of my hands, and my boss would have to go in the room, and we're in the back, and then when I can look up and I see him, I was okay. He was right behind me. And if I sat in a restaurant, I'd have to sit in the corner so that I'm fully in tune with everything in the room, everybody, and because if somebody come up and touch me on the shoulder, I'd jump, and my food would probably go flying on the floor. So after my dad passed away, somebody suggested I see this Christian counselor in Princeton, Sue Foley. So I went to see her, and she says, has anything changed since your dad passed away? And after a lot of thinking about it, I says, I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. Even though I wasn't living with him, I still had this fear of the dark most of my life. And she said, well, next time we meet, we'll have intercessory prayer. So she prayed forgiveness throughout from conception, birth, and everything right on through my life. And I left there like no big deal, nothing really happened. But next day at work, somebody drops a pallet behind me, and I didn't jump. And then later I met someone face to face in the stairwell, and I didn't jump. So I'm thinking, is this really happening, or am I just wishing it happened? So that was about 15 years ago, and I'm still psyched that I walked out of there completely healed of this fear of being snuck up on. Growing up, we went to the Unitarian Church on the Common. When I was in the 1st grade, I remember, I think it was Reverend McGinty came over to our 1st grade class and played his banjo for us. And I remember I got to stand right next to him watching him play this banjo. I was so enthused about it that I said, someday I'm going to learn to play a banjo, after hearing that. And years later I did. So when my kids got into the 1st grade, I came over and played my banjo for their class. And hopefully that maybe one child or two will be inspired to someday play the banjo because they were inspired when I played it. In later years, Reverend Jaffa, Lawrence Jaffa, was the minister. And he was speaking more about psychic phenomena and this kind of thing. And during Hubbardston's bicentennial, they opened the finished chapel in Pitcherville to have a bicentennial service. And at that time, the group in Templeton, they purchased it and started the Church of the Wildwood, which had seances and the psychic stuff. And I was kind of fascinated and intrigued with that, and for a couple of years I was going there. But I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior when I was about 10 years old at a youth rally. Used to hang out with the East Templeton crowd, and there's this woman, Pauline Harris, that used to go around town, and she sees a bunch of guys hanging out on the piazza at the town hall there that asked, hey, you guys want to sing around a campfire at King Philip Rock, or roller skating at Whalen Park? And other times we'd go ice skating. And in the midst of those evenings, they'd put us in the corner, and they'd share the gospel of Jesus Christ, and said that we're all born sinners, and if we accept Jesus as our Lord and Savior, we'd be born again Christians, which I am. In closing, I'd like to say that overall, it was good growing up on this farm. The memories, both good and bad, molded my character to who I am today. And thank you for watching.